What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie. This is part 2 of my deep diving into Jethro Tull's live albums. Recently did the studio albums, realized I was only familiar with one of their live albums, their first, Bursting Out. Absolutely fantastic, arguably one of, if not the best live albums from the 1970s, both as far as like performance, definitely as far as sound quality goes. Just a really good live document of Jethro Tull on the Heavy Horses tour from 78. That's the only album I know. And so going in officially released sequential order, not according to the shows, but according to when they were released. The second one is this one, Live at Hammersmith 84. This is a release of 8 songs from a BBC radio broadcast of a show on September 9th, 1984. I believe there's also a really good Zappa show on September 9th, 1984, right? That was the beginning of that tour. I think there's a good show. I think that date. I don't know. Only 8 songs. I could not find this album. But I did find the complete show is on YouTube, every single song. So I listened to these 8 songs and then I went back and listened to the whole show. And it's from the Under Wraps tour, as I said, or did I not say that? Which is their horribly dated, to my ears, electronic album. A lot of really bad 80 sounds. This is the tour for that. And there are 2 songs on here that are from that album. And then elements of that sort of synth keyboardness seep in the other songs. But I'll give away the end of the game. This is not going to be Bursting Out. I do not like this better than Bursting Out. But I really, really enjoyed both the show and this release in particular. It was just neat to hear these sounds. They are still cringeworthy at times. There were times when I'm just like, ooh, that's not a pleasant sound that I want to hear in my music. But the 2 Under Wraps song, Under Wraps number 1 and Later That Same Evening, and then also, I don't know if this is on the album, but in the actual show prior to them coming out and play the sort of instrumental version of Locomotive Breath that they open with, which is on the album, there's a little bit of Under Wraps, like pre-recorded, and it's just like that keyboard sound going Under Wraps, that weird chanting thing. It just sounds awkward and weird and dated, but I don't know. I really, really enjoyed it. And I thought the contrast between the songs that are just primarily, live, as we know, a traditional sort of Jethro Tull rock band, with like pretty much anytime we're like in something like, there's a Locomotive Breath on here. It's fully played as like a hard rock version of that with just these synths just kind of laid over the top. Like, and every time the synths come in with like little, almost like unnecessary burst of noise, it is kind of like, oh, that kind of took me out of that. But then on the other hand, I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool. Like, Jethro Tull does not sound like this on Bursting Out. That extra layer makes it a unique listen because it's from a tour that has these synth sounds. So yeah, just going on and on saying I was surprised at how much I thought I liked this. I was like, the second one's gonna suck. It's from the Under Wraps tour. But it didn't. So it opens up with Locomotive Breath, the instrumental. I don't know if that Under Wraps intro is on the actual album. I hope it is, because I think it's really cool. They play that, then Barr comes out and plays some like solo guitar stuff briefly, and then the band comes in with a pretty solid Locomotive Breath, where Anderson's just doing the melody on the flute. That goes right into Hunting Girl off Songs from the Wood. Great choice of songs. The entire thing's played. The energy is great. It is an awesome opener. Love the selection. It actually was the opener in the song. So I think the first 4 songs on this, Locomotive Breath, Hunting Girl, and the next 2 are in the order. That's how the show opened. Everything else is later in the show, but at least in the order that it appeared. So they're not like resequencing things. Then we get 2 songs from Under Wraps. We get Under Wraps number 1 and Later That Same Evening. I think they both sound pretty good. For some reason, the electronic stuff just doesn't bother me as much live, and maybe it's because Hunting Girl, like, more than like was like, all right, I'm happy, give me a couple more electronic things. Still some bad sounds. Like, I mean, just it would be neat. Maybe I do think that having heard these songs live, I think if they had just scrapped like the way they were done on the album and like just learned them as like traditional instruments, the songs sound better than I remember them. I'm not in any excitement to run back and listen to the album, but I am excited to go back and revisit the entire show and hear more of these songs in a live version, because I do think the songcraft comes through a little more for some reason. Maybe there's just a mental thing I have about an entire album of it. Um, uh, and One of them, I think it's Under Wraps #1. Maybe it's later that same evening. I think it's later that same evening. Has these neat, almost synclavier type percussive runs towards the end that are really cool. Obviously synthesized. It's not a real, real marimbas or anything like that, but they're really cool runs in it that stood out for me in the live version. And Later that same evening, it's a really cool, eerie intro in it. It's kind of a cool song. The pairing of these two songs was good. And then side A of this closes with Pussy Willow, which from Broadsword. That dropped later in the show. A really good version of this. There's sort of this fake out electronic intro to it, but then we go into like a normal sounding version of Pussy Willow that's a pretty good performance. Side 2, 3 sort of greatest hits type songs. We get a Living in the Past that has a lot of sort of electronics in it. They've definitely, as they kind of did in 78, now that we have that Living in the Past on the re-release bursting out. It's a reimagined version of Living in the Past, in that it's updated to sound modern to what Jethro Tull is doing. On the bursting out, it was streamlined, a little more metal. This has a little more levels of electronics in it that I think are pretty cool. And so it's neat. It's like, I like the fact that a song called Living in the Past is like embracing the future, or at least the present. So we get a good Living in the Past. I thought that was a good performance. We get a Locomotive Breath that pretty much sounds like Locomotive Breath. There is these keyboard intrusions that appear that are just almost like just these licks that come in almost unnecessarily, like just like more icing on a cake that already has icing. Reminds me of the Thompson Twins in The Name of Love. That keyboard sound, or actually that keyboard riff exactly. And then also reminds me of Anna Motion's Obsession, if you know that song from the 80s. You are my obsession, my only obsession. Dude, that keyboard sound. It's got that keyboard vibe. It's jarring every time it comes in, especially for something that's just like chugging his locomotive breath. But yeah, I don't know. It was interesting. Makes Locomotive Breath a song, that's I've heard a lot over the years, a little more. Just, it's a different flavor. It's like you're putting, I love enchiladas here, mole enchiladas. It's like you're adding like Velveeta cheese on your mole enchiladas, which that's not a good thing. And then it closes out with Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die, which, of all the songs, I'm now figuring out, maybe that's like, I think it's the last song of the night. Locomotive Breath, I think these are both the encores. Or maybe Locomotive Breath was the final song and Too Old was the encore. But they're both the last two songs of the show. It just surprises me that Too Old to Rock and Roll is that song ending, that show ending song. I would have thought something else would have slotted into that position. But it's a good version of this. You got a proggy like keyboard outro that's tacked on the end, and then we go into, at least in the live version I heard, I don't know if how the album ends, goes back into Thick as a Brick, like not back into, goes into Thick as a Brick, like the very, very, very end of Thick as a Brick, like it does on the album. And that's how the show ends, and that's how this Hammersmith, Live at Hammersmith 84 ends. I really, really enjoyed this. I don't know how much I will go back and listen to this album, but I will go back and listen to the show that's on YouTube. I think the sound quality is fantastic. Anderson's talking between songs before Under Wraps, and again, don't know if it's on the studio version or not. On this version, he talks about he brings out an acoustic guitar, or brings out a guitar to play at some point. Maybe it's before Pussy Willow, but he brings out a guitar and talks about how like it's his favorite guitar and he got it for free. And how ironic it is that like when you can't afford to buy instruments because you want to make it big, that's when nobody's giving them to you for free. But once you make it big and you're famous and you can't afford to buy instruments, people start giving it to you for free. So I thought that was a really astute observation. That's obviously easy to make, but like, yeah, maybe that's the problem. Let the people who can afford to buy their instruments buy them, and give the free ones to the struggling musicians who need them. Maybe there'll be more better music in the world. So anyways, yeah, I enjoyed this. Number 2 out of the 2 I've done. Bursting Out, obviously number 1. I don't think anything will beat that. But this is number 2. And I thought it was an enjoyable listen. And I do recommend, if you're interested, the entire show, I think it's the entire radio broadcast, is on YouTube. Every song sounds great. It's a good listen. It helped me. I don't know if I like the album Under Wraps more, but I think I appreciate the songs on Under Wraps more, especially when they're mixed in with other things. So yeah, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, share, comment, do all those things, and peace. Talk to you later.